And we got a countdown. Okay. All right. It appears as though this is live. Hello, everyone. It's 7:05 and I want to get started so that we can get through a lot of this great information. You've joined the Early Math in Libraries presentation. We're going to talk about resources and programs that support families with children 0 to 5. I am Nate Halson. I am the early learning specialist with the Sacramento Public Library. I'm trained as a librarian, and over the last 9 years, I've worked with patrons in both a community library, a small library that serves a small community, as well as an urban central library branch. But for the past 2 years or so, I've worked to support staff throughout our library system's 28 branch locations in their work with families and children under the ages of 5. So I develop and implement different types of system-wide early learning initiatives like Early Math, for example, and provide training and story time and play-based programming to staff. I have to say at the top that I'm super thrilled to be at an Early Math forum. It's not the kind of place that I imagined myself to be as I became a librarian, but it's a really great space for us to connect and talk about how early math and libraries intersect. And for that, I want to thank really the team at the California Early Math Project for this invitation. Okay, let's talk a little bit about our goals for today. I have come here with a few of them in mind. And it's my hope really to bring valuable information to those of you who are in this space working with young children in all the varying ways that you do. And I guess I have like a little request. I don't know how this will work, but if in the chat you can maybe let me know what your connection to young children or early education is. Are you a teacher? Do you run a center, a daycare center? Are you a parent? Are you a caregiver? Are you a librarian? I'd be really curious to see if you want to type that into the chat. It'll also help me kind of fine tune maybe some of the points I'm trying to make if I know kind of where some of you are coming from. But throughout the rest of the 45 odd minutes we have together, I'm going to talk about libraries and the place that they have in early learning, the early learning environment in communities. I'm going to talk about the Sacramento Public Library's approach to bringing early math to our library community. I'll engage in conversations about how you can bring early math into the programming that you already do. So already existing library programming. That includes story time, which I see we have some infant teachers, some Montessori kindergarten teachers. I'm going to guess you all read and sing with your children. And I have some really fun ways of doing that because at the end, I'm going to try and sing and read a little bit with you and include some math ideas in that process. Okay, so let's start with the expected. Early literacy in libraries, not early math per se, but early literacy in public libraries. Libraries provide services for all families, as you know, and that includes early learners, right? Our early learning programs are increasingly visited by children between the ages of 0 to 3. Indeed, this makes sense in California, particularly because we're seeing more and more formal learning access spread throughout our communities for children 4 and up. So in response, when we design our programs and a lot of our resource development takes place, we're thinking a lot about these very young learners, right? So our story times are becoming more scaffolded to the 0, 1, 2, 3 year developmental stage and age. And I think that's really important, right? So as you see here on the screen, and as all of you know, so much learning occurs, especially in those first 3 years, but in the first 5 particularly. And it's a time or a period in a child's life for a family where access to high quality early learning experiences and activities can be limited or expensive. So libraries can provide an additional access point for families with children at that age. Now, for almost 20 years, librarians have truly formally leveraged research to message to families that strong early literacy skills are a precursor to later reading success, right? It's an essential aspect of our work. How do we build strong readers, raising a strong reader? And that libraries and library staff, through our programming and the resources that we offer, can help and support families in cultivating these early literacy skills, right? This is done especially and perhaps most recognizably in a program that you probably are all familiar with or think about when you think about early learning in libraries, story time, right? So in story time, we're helping caregivers and parents learn different types of strategies that they can take home that help them grow the early literacy skills of their children. And we know that this specifically works, right? Research tells us that it helps families build out an understanding of what early literacy skills are and how to support them, and families come to them. So pre-pandemic, for the Sacramento Public Library, we were seeing across our 28 locations over 3,000 children a month at our Storytime programs alone. We provide this space that has low barrier access with large repeat audiences, and those audiences include parents, but also often caregivers, friends, family, neighborhood childcare providers, etc., who attend these programs and use these resources. And for some of them, we are often the only point of early learning access for those families, which is important when we start to consider access for early math supports too. So I want to transition over to that subject, right? That's what we're here to talk about. So we can talk about that now. Let's consider it. Early math and libraries. For me, I want to consider the fact that early math skills, as we all know, are this very strong indicator of later academic success, right? One thinks about it and intuitively you think it's a great indicator for later math success, but it's also, of course, an indicator for later reading success. Whereas those pre-literacy skills that I was speaking to in the previous two slides correlate with later reading success, but seem to have no effect, of course, on later math skills, right? So for me as a librarian, this can't really be ignored. And it means that we want to look at and determine ways that librarians can be more intentional about early learning math supports that we provide for families with children under the ages of 5. Okay. Before I sort of dive into those supports, I know from a librarian perspective, resources are a really fun thing. So I want to shout out a library resource and talk about a little bit about context, like where we came to this idea of early math. So for me and members of the Sacramento Public Library's sort of early learning committee, early math came on our radar through this publication you see on your screen, right? This was presented to us through a California State Library workshop. Shout out to the California State Library. And it's called the Reimagining School Readiness Report. It's developed and published by the Bay Area Discovery Museum. I am certain that many of you out there know about the Bay Area Discovery Museum and their resources. But if you don't, it's an excellent resource for anyone working with young children, even if you're not working in a library. This particular report was developed by the Bay Area Discovery Museum to use at library training opportunities, where they were discussing a new approach for libraries to talk about and develop supports for school readiness, which is a concept all of us know about. It's sort of this umbrella term that basically includes a number of things that community members will seek from libraries and other early education organizations. And it's something that we focus on in our programs and our design, in our resources for children and families under 5. So inside this report, they mention a number of different ways that libraries can support early learning, early development. That included things like dexterity, body movement, etc. But they also pointed out early math and how important it is to later reading and academic success. And so it was at this point that it became clear to us that early math was sort of a vital element of raising a strong reader. Okay, let's see if I can switch the screen. Yes, okay. So we've gained that knowledge. We've read this report. We're intrigued by this idea of early math, and we start to look into it. But how do you bring something like that to an organization? If it's small or large, it's not really it's not really a huge difference. It's something to bring this to an organization and its staff and have them both buy into the idea of early math as something that's valuable and that supports their families, but also help them build and design programming and resources that bring it to families that the organizations serve. So I've mentioned that the Sacramento Public Library has 28 library branches that encompass a sort of wide, sprawling urban and suburban and rural county with around 1.5 million residents, right? So it's a big area. And the libraries that serve all of those people have over 300 staff members with varying degrees of experience and varying degrees of work with families. But everybody does, in fact, engage young families because they're in the library and we're all working with them at various points. So for us, it was to take this idea, early math is valuable. It's something we want to infuse into our programming and into our resources. And we need to figure out a way to scaffold in an approach to bring these ideas and concepts into those resources and talk to library staff about what they are, especially library staff who may, perhaps not surprisingly, have an aversion to this idea of math, right? This is something that we are still working on, right? It's very much a work in progress, and I want to make that incredibly clear to everyone here today. So to get to where we're at today, we first turn to a small working group of librarians that meets regularly to discuss the needs of families with very young early learners. And as a group, we assessed the intended audience of an early math initiative. This meant thinking about who we would be reaching. And it included families, of course, but it also really included those staff who are frontline and serving families day to day. We identified a couple of core early math ideas. And for us, this was really important. So early math is a big concept. We decided to look at a couple of core ideas that we could introduce to staff and to families that didn't feel all that intimidating. That's meant for us that we were playing with the idea of counting and numbers, but also sorting, measuring, pattern building, shapes, and infusing these ideas into the resources that families use at the library and the way that we present them. That could be the way that we recommend or read books in Storytime or other early learning program that we'll talk about in more depth in a second. So as a group of librarians working through this idea of early math, we practiced, which was a lot of fun, actually, taking these sorts of concepts like measuring, pulling a book aside and looking at that book and figuring out ways that we can discuss measuring or play with measuring while we read the book to children. Or how do we count sets in our books? If there are 2 pigs and 3 cows, do we speak to that set and that difference, that comparison? So we played around with these ideas and figured out how we could become comfortable with them before we started to develop trainings for other staff members. But once we were comfortable with the ideas and their role in library resources, we expanded the scope of these trainings and included staff with the largest impact. And for that, it meant librarians and branch supervisors who are in library branches designing and also facilitating programs for families, right? So we took a training to that team and started talking to them about ways that they could put early math into the programs that they provide. The work of bringing early math into library resources doesn't end there. It probably won't end anytime soon. We're currently in the process of developing and implementing messaging campaigns that include deepening the knowledge of what early math is, not just for our community, of course, which I'll talk about next, but that staff that works frontline. So those who aren't librarians or branch supervisors, but are interacting with families every day as they enter the library and are answering questions about books or toys that they find in the library space, and letting them know more and more about the intention that we put in to selecting those materials and its relationship to early math. So this means a lot of regular correspondence and program messaging and highlighting those intentional connections. We're taking the approach very slow, which I really like. So instead of one long email, as I'm sure we've all received, to a large number of staff that describes sort of with bullet points what early math is and how the library can support it, we've been breaking down concepts that we've been playing with. So this idea of measuring in early childhood and sending those out in bits over longer periods of time so that staff can kind of sit with the ideas, tie them to the specific programs that the library provides, and gain a better understanding of what we mean when we speak about early math in libraries. So a lot to talk about in one slide. I know this. It's a full-blown attempt to bring everybody on board and learn more about what early math is and how it relates to library services. And it's fully ongoing. And it wasn't something that we did alone, right? A big part of our initiative or this ongoing process has been checking in with subject experts and developing relationships and building collaborations. So we are librarians and we understand early literacy. We play with books. I've got great ideas for new and fresh books all the time. We work within the realms of community and family engagement. We're a convener. We're not necessarily experts in early math. In fact, I think, as I mentioned, it's oftentimes really intimidating for us. So for our part at the Sacramento Public Library, we decided to reach out to the California Early Math Project So they had been providing resources online that we've been looking at and helping us gain a little bit of a foothold on what early math skills might be and ways that we might be able to infuse them into our services. They were receptive to reaching out and talking to librarians about how early math can play a role in library services. So we had a conversation about the varying approaches that we took. We asked about what we're playing with and whether or not they're relevant. And are we using them appropriately when we talk to staff and families? And presenting them with the kinds of programs that we look to design or even had designed allowed us to have conversations that would deepen our confidence with the subject matter, but also build out a collaborative relationship that I think is really just getting started. On the screen, you see a set of tip cards, and I want to highlight these. These are a pretty interesting idea. We know that messaging to library communities needs to be varied. A tip sheet telling an adult about the ways a book can be read can be really valuable for some. But for other family members, maybe brevity is really essential. So we took some tips from the Count, Play, Explore selection on the California Early Math Project's website and took that text and turned them into these small 4x6 tip cards that are connected together with a ring and are working to print these and put them into our early learning spaces. So it's a collaborative space where the experts are able to provide us with these really excellent, easy to follow tips that families can use. And we took 9 elements and ways that libraries speak to families about early literacy historically, but also now early math, and put them into play. We're in the process of making sure that this is a product that can also go onto the California Early Math website at some point that can be used elsewhere. We're also evaluating books and book guides that the California Early Math Project has, looking at them from the perspective of a library. It's a really fun way for us to engage in conversations about how books can play a role in early math. Okay, there are, however, tons of different access points that we are building out for families and members of the community to learn a bit more about early math. One type of messaging isn't going to reach all, so we're developing these additional approaches. And on the screen, you see 3 different ways that we're both messaging, but also programming for the community. So we've highlighted our early math initiative by making it a focal point on our website, right? We describe what early math is in a very short amount of words, and provide upcoming events and activities that link families to early math resources. We're bringing on additional experts into the fold. So in the center here, you see Dr. Janae Brown-Wood, who's a professor of early education and an author of books, and is coming to the Sacramento Public Library to read a new math-centered book called Too Small Tyson and talk with families about early math. On the right, you see a project that we've been working on for a really long time. This is maybe familiar to some of you as Instagram Reels or Instagram Stories. And we have been building out a collection of baby storytime at home videos. And those videos have a librarian. Here is Veronica, our bilingual early learning librarian who speaks Spanish, singing a song or talking about an activity. Then they describe, as an aside, why that song is valuable or how it builds a skill, an early learning skill. And then they sing that song again. And we've done a series now of videos that point to early math ideas, such as sorting or measuring. Here is counting with 2 hands and 10 fingers. And it's been a very, very successful way for us to kind of quietly connect early math to the resources that families find in front of them wherever they are. So it's been fun for us to figure out ways that we can start talking to our communities about this support of early math and how the library is providing it to them through resources. I want to talk a little bit about the kinds of programming that we've built or the ways that we've infused early math into already existing programming as well. So if you are a librarian out there, or if you are developing out early learning resources, so I hope some of this could be really helpful to you, or it's something that you could speak to your libraries about their potential for offering. On the screen right here, you see a flyer and some slides from a workshop that we have presented virtually on 4 occasions in English and in Spanish. And it is a workshop that focuses on early math, right? So librarians in the room today will be familiar with workshops that we've presented for maybe a decade or more called Every Child Ready to Read. And so these are in-person or virtual events. They tend to be around an hour, 45 minutes. and they're intended to be family programs, but they're also meant to provide in-depth information about research and strategies for supporting early literacy. And the two things don't instinctively go together, right? So you have a library program with a large number of families with very young children looking at a PowerPoint screen that talks about what early literacy skills are. We've developed a strategy to infuse songs and play activities, reading of stories into that information and making it so that families can come together, because we often see families together, and participate in these workshops, be them virtual or in person. So we took that idea, we matched that type of program and developed an in-person and virtual workshop called Fun with Early Math. This is also around an hour long, and it follows that specific type of pattern where we speak to the value of early math, talk about what it is, or ways that it can be supported, and then we sing and we read with the families that are present as well. If you're a librarian in the room, we're more than happy to share some slides if you're interested in something that you would like to present, or if you're otherwise interested as well. But it really does follow that Every Child Ready to Read format, just including math concepts, which has been pretty successful too. Our virtual programs for that have seen pretty decent attendance, sometimes 30 to 40 families in a Zoom room, which is quite a few for that type of long-winded information session, to be honest. In our libraries, we also play passively in this context, right? All our libraries offer toys for families to use at any time throughout the day. As you can see here on the screen, there are ways to engage in early math conversation and play using these particular types of toys, right? So we have balls and trucks and tubes of different sizes, shapes, and colors that allow for pattern play, that allow for talking about distance and speed or fit, big or small, fitting inside of tubes, etc. And we make sure that our staff in each branch are sort of at least pointed out to why these particular toys were picked. And we talk to them about how early math can be supported using materials during sort of our regular newsletters. So we speak to these toys in a newsletter that goes out every 5 to 6 weeks and include those sorts of tips for them to take with them throughout their days as they play with families. This is a program called Explore and Learn. So Explore and Learn is a play-based program with fun learning activities for young children and their caregivers to meet others and play together. It's unique in that it's a weekly program, and it's offered in addition to, or in some cases actually in place of, our storytime programming at a number of library branches through Sacramento County. It meets different needs. It has sort of an informal drop-in structure, but is still very intentional in the way that we design it. And it sort of seeks to meet the needs of varying kids of varying ages and developmental stages at the exact same time. So whereas a story time may have a focus on a certain developmental stage, these programs are designed to allow for some scaffolding. They're also really importantly programs where a family can arrive and play with their child or members of the community using the language that they know best, right, as they talk and play, which is really valuable for libraries, in particular in Sacramento County, where the language diversity is so great, and we're not always as staff able to meet it. You can see in these pictures that the stations are set up for children to try out different types of learning. It's child-directed, and the materials are selected with early math play in mind. So this program, Explore and Learn, does a lot to help children play with and explore early math concepts and ideas. What we see here, you'll see some balls and cars, pool noodles, abstract sensory toys, even some cooking tins and things like that, some mailing tubes, reused cardboard. So these are materials that will encourage children to sort, to roll, to measure, to count. The textures and the colors and the size of objects are varied, and you can have conversations about their attributes and sort and classify them, develop these types of early math ideas. And they do this while they're cooking and talking about their favorite foods, or while they're building ramps or towers or roads or whatever it is they choose to develop with their family or their caregiver. We build this as a support for early math, and when staff are trained to facilitate it, we include talking points for them to think about and incorporate in their conversations with caregivers about how the play that children are engaged in can support early math skills at home and why that's valuable. You can see here a staff member modeling also varying types of approaches to this play. And we scaffold it for various ages to inspire families to continue this sort of development at home. And I bring that up and point it out because it's important for us at libraries, since most of the very young children that we spend time with see us very infrequently. If we're lucky, we get them for 20 minutes a week, and that's if we're lucky. They spend time, of course, most of their time with caregivers at home. These are quite young children, and the largest impact is at home. So for us, it means including some DIY materials, speaking to the caregivers about why we've chosen them, and how easy they are to find at home, and how they can continue that sort of repetitive early math skill building play at home, in between sessions at the library if they come to multiple ones. And this is a design that is inspired by Storytime. It's the approach we've always taken to Storytime. And in Storytime, we're modeling, right? Librarians, again, see these families maybe once a week for the 20 minutes that we facilitate a story time, and then maybe a couple minutes afterwards for a play session or finding materials and books. The families, however, they know better when a child is in the mood for an activity, a song, or a movement, and they can do it over and over with them at home. So repetition is how, of course, the brain develops. And for us in Storytime programming, we're able to model simple activities that they can repeat wherever they find themselves. But Storytime also includes information dissemination, which is why I want to bring it up here as it relates to early learning as well. We call these asides. So as we read a book, for example, or maybe when we sing a song, what we'll do is we'll attempt to inform an adult of why that song or why that book is vital for a child's early development, right? So if we're singing the song Open, Shut Them, we can speak to the development of small muscles in the hands that will, for example, help a child later hold a book or maybe a pencil or type on a keyboard, right? So it's an early developmental point, and we want the grown-up to know that we're not just singing the song because it's fun, and it is, but that there are developmental reasons for that song's use. And this is something we're trying to work into early math. So our working group is working at ways to bring these types of asides to our Storytime programming. This is a way that families can better know why doing an activity like this is important. They can take that activity then home and know that when they're doing it with their child, they're developing a particular skill as they repeat it over and over, and really solidify that skill with their child. So I want to work through a couple of examples here before we get to an opportunity to ask some questions that might inspire you if you're not a librarian or if you are. So looking at a couple of books that are interesting that provide interesting opportunities for you to speak to early math in the centers or early education spaces you're at, but also maybe some songs and activities. So bear with me. If I sing and you want to sing at home, of course, I think that's great and fine, but it's not entirely necessary. We'll talk a little bit about the books, and I'll sing the songs so you can also take them with you outside of this this forum. The books that I'm going to read are excerpts, of course, not the entire book. And I'll try and talk to you all a little bit about how I see them linking to early math. So I'm going to kick it off with a book that you see here on the screen. This is called A Parade of Elephants, and it's a picture book written and illustrated by Kevin Henkes, who is kind of a legend in children's publishing, a long-standing writer and illustrator of books back into the days when I was a young child. He writes picture books as well as chapter books even. Just really a great accomplished author. This is a book from about 3 years ago. And the books that he's been writing over the past number of years seem to have really been inspired by early childhood development, in that they are really appropriate for a young toddler set, or maybe a baby even. They have bright sort of colors that are easy to see, big words, not too many sentences, and lots of movement. And this book is no different. So as you can see, this isn't really a straightforward counting or concept book, although I can imagine Henkes and his editors were thinking a little bit about patterns as well as opposites when they built this book. But they tend to, books that don't focus so clearly on those sorts of concepts work really well with kids because they tend to be fun and full of movement and don't necessarily have to sacrifice that flow for the concept that they're trying to uplift. So this book features an animal that children really love to imitate. and play with, right? So we have an elephant, and an elephant does a lot of big stomping, right? Which is a big body movement that can help develop those muscles for children. They have these funny trunks that make funny noises when they blow, and make those noises with kids. And they're animals that they're familiar with. I'm not entirely certain why the elephant is such a popular animal with children, aside from the fun in playing with them, but maybe they see them at a zoo, but it's not something a lot of the kids I work with are seeing on a regular basis. But it's a feature in a lot of books, so I think they're really familiar with elephants, and it's kind of a fun and interesting and lovable animal. What I think about this book when it comes to early math, in particular, is a pattern. So this is a book that can really help you develop pattern prediction, or talk to adults about the importance of patterns. So if you see here on the cover, you will see a pink, a green, a red, a yellow, and a blue elephant. And that same pattern is used throughout every spread of the book. And it's a pretty hard pattern, actually. It's not something that you're going to find a lot of young kids being able to say, like, oh yeah, then yellow and blue. But if you are consistent in your cadence in the way you read a book like this and say we have a pink and green and red and yellow and blue elephant on each page, by the end of the book, you'll say pink and green and red and yellow and allow for the children to finish it. And they inevitably, there will be a number that will shout out blue. They're looking at it, of course, but at the same time, you've created an opportunity for them to complete a pattern, which I really love about this book. But it's also one that plays with opposites. So let's take a look. We have 5 elephants marching. You can march and march and march and march with the kids that you're reading to. And you can look at these elephants and say, look at, they are pink and green and red and yellow and blue. 5 elephants marching. They march up, 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 and then the opposite, down, down, down. There they are going up, 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 and down, down, down. And they are pink and green and red and yellow and blue, right? They go in, and out, out, out. You see the elephants marching in, and out, out, out. And they are pink and green and red and yellow and blue, right? Pink and green and red and yellow and blue. So the book goes on and continues with more of those opposites and really allows for you to play with the pattern of the elephants, the sounds of the elephants, the motions of the elephants. It's a really great book to engage and bring in very young children, while at the same time teaching them these types of concepts that are quite valuable for their early development. Okay, A Parade of Elephants by Kevin Henkes. The second book I have might be familiar to some of you. Grace Lynn is, of course, a very well-regarded, well-awarded author of picture books, but she also writes a math series called Storytelling Math. And there are a lot of authors that contribute to that series. She has a number of titles and is, I think, closely linked to that project. This is a book that she wrote and won a Caldecott Award for, Caldecott for Illustrations. It's very beautiful, and that you have this very prominent Black background, which is really great for young children to see the story in front of them, right? So it really brings out the colors that are otherwise drawn and the objects that they're looking at. And it's called A Big Mooncake for Little Star. And this is a book that plays a little bit with subtraction, I think. Eating actually is a really great activity to talk about varying early math ideas. Putting something into your body, of course, is adding something to your body. Eating from a big mooncake, as we see Little Star doing here, is taking away from it. And inside this book, there are great opportunities to talk about size as this child eats a mooncake. So I'm going to read a little bit of this book, a bit more, I think, of this book, and we'll see a little bit what happens here with Little Star. Okay, so here we see Little Star and Little Star's mama, and they have this enormous mooncake, and they're laying it onto the night sky to cool. Mama looks at Little Star and says, now, Little Star, your mooncake took us a long time to bake, so let's see if you can make it last a while. Can you remember not to touch this big mooncake until I tell you? Little Star, of course, looks at Mama and says, yes, nodding her head. The next night, laying in bed with a rabbit, as we see, Little Star remembers that big mooncake again. Oh, That one bite had been so sweet, so tasty. Was that cake still there? It was. Would her mama notice if she took just a tiny little nibble? Little Star didn't think so. So really tiny little nibble, yum, Little Star says. And night after night after night, Little Star returns to the mooncake to take a tiny nibble after tiny nibble after tiny nibble of the big mooncake. And over a period of time, it gets smaller and smaller as she takes more and more and more away until one night, Little Star's mama went to look for that big mooncake. It was gone. Where was it? Instead of a glowing round cake, there was just a trail of twinkling crumbs, these very tiny little crumbs. Little Star, her mama said, shaking her head even though her mouth was curving, you ate the big mooncake again, didn't you? Little Star looked up with a grin reflecting her mama's style, said yes. Now let's go make another one. Right, so another one too, adding a second there as well is really nice. A big mooncake for Little Star. That's an excerpt as well. There's a lot more to that book, but it can be read with relatively young kids. You can see that there are different ways to read it. Potentially, you can skip sections as well, but it scaffolds up into older ages and can be played with for toddlers as well. I like to do the tiny eating hands, which helps build dexterity, but grab those little pieces of the mooncake as Little Star eats it bit by bit. And so through these actions, of course, we see some subtraction, we see shapes, we see this big circular mooncake get smaller and smaller and smaller. And although it's not a traditional number book or accounting book, it does teach that early math concept. It includes things like comparison, even on the title, a big mooncake for Little Star. Counterintuitively, of course, Little Star's bigger than the mooncake in this picture, which I think is a nice, interesting point of discussion. Okay. I want to try one more book. I think we have a couple more minutes that'll work. This is called We All Play. It's by Julie Flett. Julie Flett is a Cree Métis writer and illustrator. And the book is also called Ki Me Tu Wa Now in Flett's native language. So this is an excellent sort of sorting and comparison book, right? It's very playful. It's a fun book that you can talk about, for example, classification in a way that you compare different things. So think of this title, We All Play. And you see two sets on this book's cover, right? A set of 3 young children and a set of 3 laughing hyenas. All 6 of these creatures, these 6 of these characters are playing, right? They all have the ability to play. They all play. But they are different as well. There are 2 sets of 3. So a book like this allows for you to sort of introduce a counting activity. You can hold it up to the children in front of you and ask, of course, how many children do you see? And then we pause. Forever, sometimes we pause. And maybe a child says 3. Maybe a child starts to count. And then you can count with them 1, 2, 3. And even in this set of 3 children, there are areas for comparison, right? 2 of the children have what looks to be like a yellow sweater, whereas 1 is wearing red. 2 have dark or black pants, whereas 1 has light cream-colored pants, right? So there's comparison even inside of the children's set. You can also ask, I see hyenas. How many hyenas do you see? And we wait, and the children count them or notice them, and they say we see 3, right? So they have the opportunity to name these sets, to talk about how, although they're different, they're also the same in that they play, which is a great point of comparison. And I have a note here. Yes, of course. Also, asking a child to count or to name the number before counting when it's one of these small sets is a great opportunity to let them practice their subitization, right? So you can say, how many children do you see? And wait, yes, 3. Let's count. 1, 2, 3. This is an area where librarians have to learn a change, right? We often will say, let's count the children, instead of providing an opportunity for the children to state the number outright, which is fun. And they don't have to do it, of course. You can count it together as well. Let's take a look at this book. We All Play. Animals hide. Animals hop, hop, hop. And on this page, you see a lot of interesting stuff going on. There are 2 types of animals. If you put in the chat, what animals do you see? What kinds of animals do you see here? I see an animal that is dark and brown and big, and an animal that is small and green, but both animals that are able to hop. They're hopping, hopping, hopping. And you can hop with the kids that you're reading to too, right? So all three of these animals, the rabbit, the grasshopper, and us, are able to hop, 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 right? So that's a great point of same, right? But there is difference, right? The grasshopper is really, really, really small. And the bunny is really, really, really big. But we're a lot bigger than the bunny too at times, which is a nice comparison point, right? So animals hide, animals hop. Do you see the small grasshopper? Animals sniff. Animals sneak, sneak, sneak. And here, of course, you see a similar opportunity to talk about, what animals do you see here? One is a fox, one is a turtle. The fox is red and big. The turtle is green and small. And they both sniff and they both sneak. But the big red fox is really fast, 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 fast. And the little green turtle is really slow, slow, slow. It's an opportunity to create that comparison, to talk about same and different. Animals peek, peek, and peep, 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 peep. Here's a chance to count up higher, right? How many do we see? We see 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7. 7 peeping birds. We play too. We play too. Ki me tu wa now, me now. We play too. So We Play Too is a book written by Julie Flett. There's more to it as well. Of course, this is an expert that provides great opportunities for us to talk about a couple of different math ideas. This concept of sorting, right? We all see the motions an animal can do. 2 different animals can do the same motions, but also we can too, right? But there is differences between them as well that we can talk to as you read a book like We All Play. And this is a playful book with lots of motions that allow for young children, toddlers included, to get up and move as you read, which is a great way to engage in a book. Okay, I want to do a song or two as well. This is Walking, Walking. It's a movement song. And I like this because it teaches a pattern, which is an early math skill, right? So we're able to do walking, 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 hop, 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 running, 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 running. Now we stop. Now we stop. So as you do this over and over with kids, they're going to know the motions that come next. They're predicting that. They're moving. They're singing, developing all that dexterity, keeping moving. Walking, Walking is a song that can build an early math skill in story time. I think my time is running a little short, so I want to push to a couple more quickly. Big, 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 something you may be familiar with. It's a motion in an opposite song, so you can show the child what you're doing with your movements, which helps build vocabulary, but also shows an opposite, right? So big, big, big. This is small, small, small. This is short, short, short. We have tall, tall, tall. This is fast, fast, fast. This is slow, 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 right? And other kinds of opposites can be included here, and you can let the grown-up know that building out this vocabulary will help a child describe, to sort, to classify later on. And one more I'll do before we head off to an opportunity to answer some questions is Bread and Butter, which is a song you can really mess around with and make up as you go. And I've done this one to do counting, right? You can say, like, let's say our names as loud as you can, but in this song, we'll count our fingers. And it's a little bit of a beat, but if you have a baby, you can bounce them, right? If the child is very young, and you can sing bread and butter, marmalade and jam. Let's count our fingers as loud as we can, right? So you're silly, you're playful, and you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you can sing the song again with an opposite, like quiet, quiet. Okay, I want to do one last point before I throw it over for questions, if there are any. I want to circle back to this idea of a library's early math initiative, which is an ongoing process for us of linking library services to this area of early childhood development, early math. So the impact of this work is really widespread. There are inequities in access to high quality early education, resources in all communities. The library doesn't claim to fill them. We are working to make strides to reach out to communities that have lacked access or been ignored by libraries in the future as well, in the past as well. We do work, however, to provide welcoming spaces that invite families with very young children to gain access to high quality programming that's low barrier and free. We take that programming outside into the community and into community spaces where families are. And I think that building out this focus allows for you to create an additional access point for communities to gain information and support about vital early learning resources. And I am being told, I think correctly, that my time is up. It went a little longer than I thought. I apologize for that, but thank you so much for listening to me this afternoon. This evening, I guess, for many of you now. Okay. Can we take any questions, or should we should stay? No. Okay. You got it. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My information is right there for you if you'd like it.